learn everything, because everything is relevant potentially. Everything can be relevant if you want it to be, or if you're thrown in a position where it needs to be.
Right.
Know everything. Be curious about everything. Even if you're not curious about it, learn about it.
This week's episode of Life with Strings Attached was filmed on location in Northern Ontario, Canada. Truthfully, in my backyard. At our cottage on the lake, by special request of today's guest, Mike Sankey. Mike Sankey's been creating one-of-a-kind guitars for over 25 years in his workshop in Ottawa, Canada. While better known for organic yet futuristic electric instruments, his work has always been informed by deep knowledge and appreciation of historical precedent. Leveraging modern techniques such as 3D printing and computer-aided design has been a means to an end for the goal of making instruments that are each totally unique expressions of the luthier's art. I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Mike. I hope you do as much as I did.
Michael Sankey, welcome to Life with Strings Attached.
Thank you for inviting me.
In case anyone's wondering, that's Stanley Tucci's recipe for a Negroni, which is a classic Negroni where he doubles the gin
Oh, really?
and shakes it nice.
You trying to get me drunk? What are you
No,
trying to do?
it cuts the sweetness because the vermouth and the are a little bit sweet, and so this is a slightly less sweet Negroni.
Yeah.
And also
I
shaking
like
in
that.
the ice, it becomes a little
Yeah,
watered
I like
down
it this
as
way.
well. Yeah. So it's a good thing. Thank you for joining me here on the lake.
This is a really nice spot. Really nice spot to be in. I'm a little envious that you get to wake up to a sunrise on a lake most of the time when you're here.
Yeah.
When you're not, stuck in an airplane or some airport halfway around the world, because you do spend a lot of time doing that. So it's that's how you pay for that.
It's when you spend your life traveling to interesting places, coming home to a not interesting place eventually becomes like a bit of a, why do I live here? So we had to find a spot where we actually wanted to come back to, frankly.
Yeah. Oh, you did good.
Yeah. And so it's, and summertime on the lakes in Canada. I think a lot of people don't realize that, we live 2 hours apart in driving. About 2 hours
over 2 hours.
Here. But, you had traffic. But when there's no traffic, it's pretty much 2 hours door to door between us. But I think there's something like 700 lakes that exist in that 2 hours between us.
It's true.
Yeah.
You picked this one. This is a good one.
Yeah. But the point is, Canada's full of, I think our country has like 1/3 of the world's fresh water
Wouldn't
in
surprise
the country
me.
of Canada.
Yep. Sounds about right.
Yeah, and yet Nestle still sells a lot of water here.
Just drink from the lake, people.
The whole world envies us for our water. Why are you drinking from the bottle? Well, anyways.
A lot of us live in cities and don't have access to this, and I sometimes wonder myself, why do we do that? Live in the concrete jungle when, I guess in a lot of cases people need to have jobs in their city, and they're sort of stuck by their life circumstances to be there.
Yeah.
And I was about to say, I feel lucky that I'm not trapped by that kind of a job, but it wasn't luck. It was intentional.
That's right.
To, choose your own destiny and be able to work from home and build guitars in your own timeline. And that way we were able to be there for our kids whenever they need us. We don't have to waste time in a commute driving into the office every day.
Yeah.
When your commute is make coffee in the kitchen, walk 20 feet to the garage workshop, and I'm at work now.
Yeah.
And Helen works from home too, so it's like it's kind of neat that your coworker, instead of gathering around the water cooler, you gather around the coffee pot. Oh, how's your morning been so far?
Yeah.
Oh, it's good. We got some new orders doing this and that, and I need you to fix that thing on the website. Okay, and then back to work, or make your own schedule, whatever works.
Yeah.
It's a good way to be.
That's really the driving factor for most guitar makers that I know, is it's about the life they want to live.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, I think they got started in guitar because that's what they loved. But then it sort of, it lends itself naturally to working from home, because if you're, or making your own schedule, because that's what you can do. And then, you start to appreciate it. Because if you're working, say, for another, a bigger guitar making company, well, you might as well be working in the
wrong. I don't mean that the act of making the guitar is the life that you want. I mean that most guitar makers that we work with anyways, that are doing, typical, usually small one person shop, they're willing to perhaps make less money than they might otherwise, because there's a life that's the trade-off, right? To a certain extent.
Quality of life. Like if you're spending, if you're earning more money, but you're not enjoying that aspect of your life, it's like, what are you earning?
Yeah.
Whereas, it's just, you got to find the balance that makes you happy. And quality of life is how I try to measure, like, is this providing me optimum quality of life? And if it isn't and doesn't seem like it's going to in the future, then you gotta change directions.
I think, was it Thoreau quoted yesterday, I think it was recently found, that it was the cost of everything is the amount of life you trade for it.
I
mean, if that doesn't define the kind of work that you and I do, I don't know what does.
Well, also, and it's just, we all have different valuations of what our lives are worth, and that's why we have clients who are willing to spend $10,000 on a guitar, and I would never spend that kind of money on a guitar, but for them, it's a worthy trade-off. And finding the difference in the value of things is how trade, and that's how economics happens. I think this is worth this much. I think this is worth this much.
Right.
We're both happy.
That's right.
That's why economics is not zero sum.
Right.
That's how growth happens.
Yeah. Relationships are that way. It's both of us have been, married a long time to our wives, and I think we both have really wonderful relationships with our spouses. And it's equitable. It's not fair.
Right.
There are definitely things that my wife does a lot more of than I do, and vice versa. But in the end, we both feel like we've got a good deal, and we're happy with our.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so that equity and that life in equity and that value proposition, that's really. But I don't know what it is that makes some people disagreeable enough to say, I'm not going to do what everyone else is doing. Because it's not, to be a guitar maker working by yourself means that you are, as my stepfather would famously say, chief cook and bottle washer. You got to do it all. Right, like
it gets pretty irritating when you sort of wake up one morning and you're like, oh, now I'm going to have to learn how to be a videographer because I didn't have enough on my plate about being an accountant and a photographer and a social media manager. And, oh yeah, wait, I actually build guitars too in there somewhere. And you keep having to learn new things, and it's kind of annoying, but it has to be done, and it's still worth the trade-off.
Yeah. I think you're well suited for this, and the reason I say that is because I think that you are very good at being curious and exploratory. As you know, my kids went to a bit of a. We had an at odds relationship with the school when our kids went to the public school system for the first part of their life.
Yeah,
and we were always at odds with them. They didn't get their homework done. I'm like, get your job done during the day. They come home, they need some family time, and the school's like, what are you talking about? I can't believe, no, they have to do 3 hours of homework. He's like, he's in grade 3. The kid is stressed out, and we have crappy family time because you can't get it done during the day.
The best way a child learns is through exploration. And I think our children know this instinctively, and I know I did, because I was terrible about doing homework. Did very well in school, but terrible about doing homework because instinctively this is bull. I you know, one
12
day.
hours a day of clerical work for children is
Yeah.
completely ridiculous.
Well, like I'm thinking one instance where I had an assignment that I had to do for school, and I was like, I don't want to do that, and instead, I was like, it's a nice, you know, snowy December day. Me and my brother decided we were going to go tobogganing, but instead of using our regular toboggans, we were going to build one. And so we, you know, found some cardboard boxes and some sticks, and we lashed together a toboggan out of cardboard, and we sent it down the hill together, and it fell apart in the second run, and we laughed, and it was hilarious. And we just had a class on executive planning and executing. We had we just gave ourselves a course on design and structural engineering and physical education and physics when you hit the bottom of the hill, obviously.
Yes.
You know, and I learned that instead of doing my homework. So that just seems ridiculous to make your kids do that kind of level of homework. And, you know, I sent mine to, they call it an alternative school, but it's still part of the public school board in Ottawa. And it wasn't super alternative. It wasn't like your Waldorf school, but it was a little more play-oriented. They had, you know, multi-age classrooms, so, you know, you'd have some of the older kids would help out some of the younger kids. You know, so it was still recognizably pretty standard school, but they just made it a little more humane, and that helped a lot, I think. So they didn't have too terrible an experience, I hope.
You know, I these themes I see in you and what you do in your personal life and your work. That's when things are really working for me, is when I see the guitar maker's life in their work. And that's
in harmony.
It's in harmony, and that sort of curious exploration, willing to do it a different way than others are.
Well, it's just when you know something, when you know it's right, when you know you're doing the right thing. You know, you had that quote about the disagreeable person is one who.
I should just say it. So it's George Bernard Shaw, and I will paraphrase as best as I can, but it's basically the agreeable man conforms to the world around them, whereas the disagreeable man insists on the world conforming to themselves. And therefore, all progress depends on the disagreeable.
Well, what I was thinking there is that one could say that I am disagreeing with the world, and I would say, no, the world is disagreeing with me.
That's exactly it. You insist on the world conforming to you.
No, I insist. I insist on. It's they're doing it wrong. This is right, and this is why, you know, somehow being a guitar maker always seems right, even though the world was telling me otherwise by not getting sales or success for a long time, or well, even now. But if you feel like anything else would be a waste of all the time and effort that you've done so far, you know, I feel like, it's the world deserves the best of me. The world deserves for me to use the particular, you know, skills that I have by the life that's shaped me. The world deserves for me to leverage that in the best way to make the things that I know are my best work. And I'm not gonna, you know, just make some crap because it's easier to sell crap than it is to sell gold.
Well, why not? Because I think a lot of people do.
Well, yeah.
So why not you?
That's what makes a person is their personality, I guess. I don't know. I just have, you know, if you have ideas, you have to follow through. If you have
No, you don't. You don't have to follow through.
Okay, people don't follow through, and that's unfortunate. But maybe it's stubbornness, maybe it's ego, maybe I don't know what it is, but I refuse to be completely put into a box. I mean, you know, there's always, you have to compromise. No, I don't even want to use the word compromise, but you have to shape your life to a certain extent, because you have to exist in this,
Yeah.
this place we all live. But I guess I'm a little more, disagreeable about it.
Yeah. We negotiate who we are in our community, in our culture.
Yeah.
There's an interesting social thing that's happening in the West right now where many people are saying, I am this because I say I am this. And that can be true to a certain extent, but you actually still have to negotiate. We are not an individual island. We are who we are within relationship to our family, our society, our culture. And,
Yes.
and we must negotiate that. We learn it as kids because we say something stupid and our friends laugh at us. We go, that feels awkward, so I don't say that stupid thing again. And you change who you are a
Or
little
maybe
bit,
you
right?
do
Or maybe
because you thought it was good that they laughed.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Carrey must have thought otherwise.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I made them laugh, even if it was at my expense. I needed a laugh.
and that felt good somehow, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, and you do it in your relationship with your partners and your spouses, right? It's like, I want them to want to be close to me, so I'm going to stop doing the things that pulls them away. I'm going to do a little more of the things that brings them in closer, and that we do the same thing with our products and our art, though, right? It's like you can make whatever you want if you have no need for someone else to buy it. But if you have a need for someone else to buy it, you better meet the needs of someone more than yourself. And so
You need to convince them that you are making their
your first
needs.
instruments that you hung up in the music store in Ottawa, which you thought were good enough at the time.
Oh, I fixed them and sold them at some point,
you
though.
negotiated and you learned that actually that isn't good enough.
That was just learning.
But that's also you learn because it's not good enough. No?
Yeah.
Would you
Okay.
produce that guitar now? Would you take that guitar to a NAMM show now? Those first couple of arch tops that you made years ago?
Well, after I fixed them up a lot, maybe. But
That's the
like
obstinate punk in you, but that's not a serious answer. You
that-
know it.
no, it's just the ship of Theseus. I have taken some old guitars and taken them apart and reused bits and pieces. And
Sure.
in fact, one of the guitars that I did bring to the NAMM show
Yes.
had a chunk from an earlier failure of a guitar that was
It's
incorporated.
a piece of a tree. You could call it an earlier failure of a tree if you'd like.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. I mean, I guess we could debate the thesis
Okay.
if you want, but we're talking about materials at that point in time. And it is not just the materials. It's the materials and shape and their function.
Yeah.
And you negotiate that relationship because you do have a need. And part of your need is to eventually exchange money for the object you had because you've chosen not to get money some other way.
Yes, but I guess, negotiate, but I am more willing to be a bit obstinate about the earning of money, in part because my lovely wife is
Yeah.
better at making a product that the world likes.
Yes.
Not necessarily intentionally. She doesn't, she's a creative too and does her own thing, very, very much her own
Very
thing.
strong style. It's
Yep.
not like anyone else's.
But it turns out that people like it and are willing to pay for it.
Yes.
And thank goodness.
She gives some love here. That's Helen Dardick.
Yeah.
Is that her handle? If you want to check out Mike's
Oh,
wife's work,
Yeah.
her name is Helen Dardick.
HelenDardick.com.
She's a great illustrator. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and painter mostly, and
painting,
teacher of art and painting. Anyway,
Yes, yeah.
but I'm sure she gets annoyed at me for not earning very much.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel less than. I don't feel like I'm a less successful artist. I just feel like, okay, so my stuff hasn't caught on, or
Yep.
somehow they don't like it. But that's not super relevant to me.
Well, there's a trade-off in your life still, right? Because,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that you and Helen, both because you don't have a boss to answer to, when Helen's doing a show or a teaching week in Barcelona, you're like, oh, we could go to Barcelona together. And you do.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a defined amount of vacation time. And so that is a value also.
Yeah.
Money is one commodity. Time is a huge commodity.
Yes.
For people like you and I.
Yeah.
Time is a very important commodity. And quality of life and quality of environment.
Definitely.
And feeling inspired. You know?
Yeah, well, you can't, the well runs dry if you overdraw it. And the part of being creative is not being creative 24/7.
All right, so what do you do then? When the well runs dry, do you have a habit? What's that What
I don't work hard enough.
That's not true, Mike. I have met dry well Mike over the years. So, for me, I will often go to a really nice restaurant and have food that overwhelms my palate and I can't think of anything else. The kind of food you put in your mouth and you go, oh, you close your eyes and the world kind of ceases to exist for a moment. Or I'll go to an art gallery, somewhere I need input, right? What do you do when the well runs dry?
I would say, travel would be it, but it can be as simple as going for a long walk in the woods. Just getting out in nature. Out here, next to this lake, we're near Algonquin Park, and there's a lot of parklands, and that's something I try to make a point of every summer is to get away for a few days and go camping by some desolate lake somewhere.
Yeah.
And you can't bring your tools with you necessarily.
Yes.
So you just recharge. But another thing, actually, when I said you can't bring your tools with you, I have also done that where I went on vacation.
Yes.
We have some friends who have a house on the water in Belize.
Yes.
And I brought some carving tools and just decided to, do some carving and work, on the beach in Belize with just some basic tools and some wood that had washed up on shore.
Yeah.
And so it can be a vacation just to go back to basics. Just to forget about the way you're used to working on things and remind yourself that there are other ways of building things. There are other ways of making things. There are other ways of using your hand and using your brain. And actually that sort of thing has been very helpful to recenter my approach. When I start thinking too much of, should I get a CNC machine, or I'm borrowing a great laser cutter gizmo, and I've got a pin router, and I've got these really cool tools.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's easy to get lost in them. And spending a little bit of time out in the woods hacking at a piece of wood with an axe, and just an axe, is a great way to remember that it's just a perfect inclined plane stabbing its way through wood fibers, and you can do a lot with just that. And just get back to the basics of sharp steel, keen eye, fresh wood, and that's all the guitar is.
You should do that. You should make an axe guitar. No, I mean, you should film yourself with an axe and saying, I'm going to make this guitar with this.
I'll tell you, I did have this idea.
Starts with sharpening, because I need a perfect incline
I can make a pretty sharp axe if you want me to. But I got to thinking this when I was in Belize making some just wood sculptures out of driftwood, and more driftwood would come in every day, and I was like, I could probably build a guitar out of that one.
Right. And driftwood in Belize is not like driftwood here. What's washing up on the shore in Belize?
There's like mahogany and the Santa Maria wood. Actually, a lot of it is construction debris and bits of boats or docks.
But they don't make their construction like we do out of like spruce and
They don't have spruce. They have mahogany and Spanish cedar
so
and granadillo.
Chunks of wood. It's very different than our driftwood, isn't it?
Yeah. But even so, I thought to myself, I could do just build a guitar on the beach. Wouldn't that be ideal? Just sink a little workbench into the sand, have a few tools, and just build something with no electricity required. Just the shade of a coconut palm, ocean waves beside you, and like guitar building off the grid. And it's totally possible. And I still feel like this is something I could do and I could try. Get really back to basics. Because if you think about it, every guitar ever made was made without electricity or without even good steel for the most part until 100 years ago. Like, that's not that long ago. There's plenty of instruments that are still in existence today that were made by a person who had nothing more than a few steel tools, and to bend the sides they would use some coals and a couple of bricks,
Yeah.
you know, it's all possible.
Yeah.
Desert Island Luthery, that was the working title I was thinking of a book, because you can do it on a desert island, and all you need is very, very basic stuff, and that's how I would refresh. That's to keep the well running. Yeah, you have to sometimes just go right back to basics and remind yourself of how simple it is to make things. You do not need a CNC. You do not need a laser cutter. You do not need your 3D CAD modeling software. I've got those things and I can kind of use them, but I have to remind myself that I don't need them, and I'm actually happier when I don't use them.
Yeah. I mean, okay, that's super interesting. Many paths to go down on this particular one, but we're at a fork in the road, and I think that...
And I took the road less traveled by.
Yeah. So, one, I think that I have some ideas on that. You got my entrepreneur brain going, and that we should actually flesh out some things here. I have some thoughts for you.
Yeah.
That we're gonna make that work.
Okay.
But
it's a great concept
but
for
not
a show,
here
right?
in the podcast. Yeah, we've discussed it a little bit before, and I think it's a great idea that you have.
All right.
And it's your idea. But I have some practical ideas, which is part of my role in the world, is how to make things
Real.
function and make some money with them and make them happen. You know, and you know, you make things happen. You know, you do those things. Like we talked about that. You said you have to, and I was like, no, you don't have to. Most people don't.
Well, I make things happen when I can make it happen with my own two hands. But that's the problem: is the organizing, the figuring out the timelines, the organizational, the executive function stuff. I recognize. Maybe that's why I work as a lone wolf in my little shop, is because I can't be a manager of a company that has many employees and different branches and things, you know.
But the fact that you make things, let me flesh this out for a second. So, you know, everybody has to promote themselves. You have a website, I have a website, I have a few websites, you know, for our work and what we do. And at a certain, you know, when I have happy clients, you know, or someone I work with, I ask them sometimes, or they send me an email and I say, hey, can I quote that? You know, that might be useful for promotion, right? And when I had to build a website at one point in time, I asked a few people, if you mind giving me a little something about working with me, be helpful. And I kept getting back this really fucking boring, to me, answer. And it was like, Jamie makes things happen. Jamie does things. Like Jamie, and I was like, well, what does everyone else in the world do? I was like, what do you mean you make things happen? It just seems like such an unremarkable thing to say. But when I stopped and considered it, which is why I was disagreeing with you when you said you have to, I'm like, no, actually I realized most don't. And the
They just
fact
go
that
with the path
you
of least
do
resistance.
make things happen, and the fact that I
make
things
things
happen, somehow makes us unusual, but yet we don't recognize it because we don't. It's just what you do. You don't realize that everyone else, not everyone else, that many others are not. And so I have a friend of mine who's a super curious, super kind guy. He's an accountant. He's a Canadian management accountant. And we were talking about a series that I was working on, and he said, oh, Jamie, you're giving people permission to ask the question. We were walking in the woods not far from here, and I stopped, and I realized he's very sincere. And I said, Roger, it never occurred to me to need permission to ask a question. But he felt freedom that I was creating an environment where he could ask the question. And I can see the same perplexity on your own face going, what do you mean? Of course you can ask the question. But actually, many, many, many people don't feel comfortable. I was recently at a coffee shop with some family, and we had different size drinks, and we needed lids because we were traveling on, and one lid size was out. And the person with that lid size, I'm trying not to identify them, the person with that lid size said, that's okay, I don't need a drink. I said, no, we're going down the highway, you have a hot drink, we need a lid. It's okay. I said, they're right there. They want to restock it, right? They don't want that to be empty. They need to know. and you need a lid, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It was a big deal for them to interrupt the lineup to say, excuse me, the lids are empty. And I realized that's actually more normal than feeling comfortable enough to say the lids are empty. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I'd be the person who might be like, it'll be fine. Because we are, disagreeable in some aspects of our lives and careers.
Yeah.
Sometimes, we aren't that way in every aspect.
Yeah. Well, this person married into my family recently. They're married to one of my kids. And I was like, you should feel comfortable asking this. So I guess I was probably parenting a little bit in this scenario.
He's a good, polite Canadian.
And I don't want them to get scalded down as we're going down the highway.
Definitely.
So, as you know, my son Zach was on fire at one point in time, and we spent 10 days at Sick Kids Hospital burn unit. So we have a heightened awareness of
hot things do damage. Yes.
I think 70% of all burns are scalds.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So everyone in the burn unit, 7 out of 10 of them are from a coffee pot where a toddler grabs it, or a kid who gets themselves in the bathtub and only turns on the hot water, but a toddler, craft dinner, we've heard all sorts of stories. And so, I have this heightened awareness of scalds.
What do you have to do to injure yourself with craft dinner? Good heavens.
Yeah, a kid. The parents have their backs turned, and they grab the pot handle.
Oh.
And the worst thing about something like craft dinner is it doesn't just fall away.
Oh, no.
It's a sticky bomb.
It's like napalm.
Seriously, yeah, it is. And so you learn all these awful things. And so now I feel like a moral imperative to make sure
that the lid is on the coffee mug.
Yeah, there's the lid on the coffee mug. Yeah, exactly.
All right.
But it's my disagreeableness that says it's okay to push them a little bit to say, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah.
Recently I listened to a neuroscientist that said that the part of the brain that manages anxiety finds the equilibrium. It manages anxiety, and the opposite side of that is curiosity and exploration. Which is where that term is, what's the worst that could happen, comes from. That's us trying to ease the anxiety and get them towards curiosity and exploration.
Yeah.
So when they said that, I went,
literally
Jesus,
work through this.
Yes.
What is the worst that can happen? Well, this could happen, and this could happen, and this can happen. And this is there's a school of thought that you should.
Actually not so bad.
That you should. There's a name of a challenge where you challenge yourself to ask for something out, like beyond what is normal.
Yeah.
Like if you go into the coffee shop and be like, I'd like a coffee, but can I have it for free?
Yes.
And they'll say, no. And then you learn that nothing bad happened. Like that was the worst that happened is somebody just said no. It's not that bad.
Yes.
And so you get more comfortable. You defuse anxiety because you realize that nobody's going to bite your head off. Everything's going to be fine. Even asking for, asking for something when the answer is almost certainly going to be no. But you know what? Sometimes in that coffee shop, they're going to be like,
yeah,
you know what? All right, fine. I like your moxie.
Yes.
Yes. But even if they don't, the point is that you've learned to defuse it.
Right. Now here I'll flip sides and go, anxiety has a bad rap these days. Because anxiety is, what's the worst could happen? Well, I could get hit by that bus. You're like, oh yeah, they're right. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Anxiety is a good thing.
There might be a lion hiding behind that bush.
Yes. There is a good place for anxiety too.
Yeah.
So, but that comfort to challenge it, and
well, I would say there's a comfort to
wonder,
challenge intellectually. Like I just interrupted you because I feel comfortable to challenge you conversationally or intellectually.
And I want to hear it, so we're negotiating. Go ahead.
But what I was saying is that I'm comfortable being confrontational if we're talking about matters of intellect. Like if we are having a political debate on stage, or I'm not afraid of debating somebody. But in real life, being well socialized says that this is not the place for that. It's one thing to act a certain way when you're on stage. If I have a theater kid, daughter, and it's one thing when you're in this space, you can behave in this way, but in the rest of the time, when you're just in the regular human space, you're supposed to be more, well, polite, I guess.
Yeah.
And so there's always a negotiation with yourself and the world about where you stand in those two places. So I feel, I'm comfortable being confrontational intellectually, or, for design or anything like that. But I like to think that in a just a personality, and like sitting down for coffee with a stranger, I'll be perfectly agreeable and not confrontational. I know that I am just sort of innately non-confrontational in a social setting. Amiable. Okay.
That's different. So, and this is one of the problems with disagreeableness, is some people confuse that with obstinance. And they confuse that with arrogance, as it can be. Some people just disagree for the sake of disagreeing. I have friends like that who are total shit disturbers. And they don't even really believe in what they're saying. They just love the antagonistic position to get somebody's hackles up. Right?
That's useful sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
You need to test your theories. But I guess we can differentiate between those two disagreeablenesses, and it's one thing to be socially amiable and another to be intellectually confrontational. And as a professionally,
because it needs to be tested.
Yeah.
That we talk these days a lot about, well, actually we talk about science, we don't talk about the scientific method. If we did, we'd probably have less confusion about what science is.
It's not a thing, it's a process.
Nothing to believe in, it's a matter of process and results, and the fact that actually all good scientists are basically trying to disprove it all the time. And so if you say you can't challenge it, well, that's the opposite of science.
Yeah.
But I want to sort of turn this 180 degrees for a second, because
you already did that once, so now we've turned a full 360 and we're headed back.
Oh yeah, we're spinning. Well, that's a good ability in negotiation and in debate, is to be able to see it from the other perspective, even the perspective which you might disdain.
Yeah.
You might say, well, how would this person's
How did you get to that conclusion from here, and you have to understand what they're coming from to test yourself. So if you don't have a worthy opponent, you have to make your own up.
And that's humanity, because it's one of our advantages of the prefrontal lobe, our ability to hypothesize and imagine it instead of doing it, right? You don't have to run into traffic to find out if that car will kill you. You can think about it and decide not to run into traffic, because you can determine, no, I would definitely be at least very seriously hurt if I didn't die from that decision, right? So, but I want to come back on this sort of negotiation, because actually when I'm having the opportunity to share your guitars with someone else, I very commonly talk about how you constantly negotiate the shape of your instruments, because I know that you pick up the guitars and you hold them against yourself, and your ergonomic approach is somewhat theoretical, I'm sure, but a lot of it is, I pick it up, I put my arm down, I go, oh, a little more off there, a little more from here. And the funny thing is, you and I have a substantially different physical makeup. Yet your guitars are also very comfortable to me, because there's a commonality within our humanity and our biology, I guess.
Yeah, even if you're a little thicker around the middle, we're still more or less round.
More or less round. And our arm still only wants to go so high up.
Yeah, exactly.
All of those things. And so
each one of the guitars is different.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm trying to make it conform to an ideal, which is me. I'm being flexible and allowing them to be different. And, every guitar ends up being an individual thing, and people can approach them and be like, yeah, this one feels nice. It's like, trying on clothes, and you put one on, and you're like, yeah, it just fits right.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's why you try on shoes before you buy them.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com.
Yeah, but when talking about an ergonomic guitar, so the ergonomic guitar, I think, at least as far as the common lore is concerned, starts a great deal with Ned Steinberger and Steve Klein, right? But Steve reproduces that shape over and over and over again. And in a more modern contemporary, we're talking about someone like an Ola Strandberg, who again reproduces his idea of an ergonomic guitar over and over again. But you don't. And so I think that there's fundamentally different approach, which I've not ever considered before this moment, but all three of you would talk about how ergonomics are important for your guitar, but they talk about their guitar design, and you're talking about it on an individual level. So I'm going to shut up for a second. What does it mean? Tell me about that.
I'm not designing guitars, I'm making them. Design is something that is a modern concept. When you are just making things, you just make them. You know, the violin was not designed, it grew effectively, organically from the work of, you know, multiple people trying to make something that worked well, sounded good, and looked nice. And then changed over time because all the necks are different from the way they were originally, et cetera, et cetera. A design, being a designer is a concept that really only started to be needed or useful with the Industrial Revolution, where you started having mass production of articles. And the more mass-produced a thing is, the more important the design is, because if you're going to make 1,000 of something, you better have it, you know, more or less right. And if you're going to make 1,000,000 of it, you really have to have it right. Ironically, if you make 100 million of them, it can be totally wrong, because where's your competition? But so I started reading recently a book about Japanese houses, traditional Japanese carpentry and architecture. And when I say architecture, the author points out that there was no such thing as an architect until very recently, like post-World War II in Japan, because everything was made by the carpenter. They had, you know, everybody's taught by their, you know, the mentor before them. So everything is learned hands-on, passed from one generation to the next. And there were specific standardizations of measurements and things like this. So the house follows a certain pattern and a design. And so like the posts for the foundation are always a specific distance apart. And if you're making a room for this purpose, well, this room should be this dimension by this dimension. So there was no such thing as an architect. You had the carpenter. What?
I was at Osaka Palace recently. It's a large structure with very intentional architectural sort of designs in the foundation and such. There had to have been somebody, when you make a palace, like I get it that
it was
the
a
average
master
person
carpenter.
didn't make a, so you think they called them the master carpenter, even though they worked with masons and stonework also?
Yeah, it wouldn't have been an architect so much as maybe a worksite manager or something, who was like more like a landscape,
moat around the castle,
a landscape surveyor,
and there's this sweeping up architecture of stones that are interlocking in the corners that are foundationally displacing the load and such. I think what you're saying is interesting, but I think there
and I was at the castle
who understood that a little bit.
The Nijo Castle in Kyoto has the stone foundation leading to the moat that is almost exactly the same as the one in Osaka Castle.
Yes.
It was not an architect, it was generations and generations going back way long of people who were slowly figuring out the best way to create the solution to the problem.
Yeah.
And you simply apply it at a different size, scale, or something. But so being a designer is something that you only do if you are designing for industry, because you're not actually going to be making it yourself. And in, you know, with these old Japanese houses, and I'm specifically talking about houses, not so much about palaces.
Okay.
But
so I'll let you carry on with your story.
Yeah.
But
my point is that it wasn't designed because the person who was building it. it was being built by the people on the site who were, actually, pulling the saws and hewing the wood. So it wasn't separated. You didn't have a guy in a central design office in Tokyo saying, our houses in this district are all going to look like this, the way, a housing subdivision in Canada goes up. It was much more connected. They were the makers of things, not the designers of things. As it happens, though, the design is lovely because over a long enough time scale, you eventually arrive at perfection. And I'm a maker of guitars. I am not a designer of guitars.
So I'm wrestling with your terminology because my conception of design is about a thought process. Just like we talked about with the scientific method briefly for half a second. The design is a way of thinking. It's a way of rationalizing and applying logic through a well-considered process to arrive at the desired result.
Yeah.
So good design is well considered. And you have many aspects of your history from having multiple generations of scientists and engineers into from your family.
Actually, you know what I just found out? The Sankey diagram, look it up, was invented by my great grandfather's cousin.
Okay.
Who he actually knew and lived with him for a little while when they were young.
Right.
So the Sankey diagram.
Yeah.
Engineers and scientists.
More directly, your grandfather was successful enough of a scientist that he had some patents which funded the starting of a university, a substantial university, or was part
something like that. Yeah, he was one of the founding people of Brock University, and he was the second chancellor.
Yes. And there's something, am I remembering correctly, about perhaps artificial vanilla?
Oh, yeah. Well, that was he was a chemist, and he worked for a pulp and paper company. And he developed a way of basically cleaning. Well, the reason we don't have, waterways that are full of toxic chemicals was he found a way to take the toxic chemical, and instead of giving it away into the rivers and lakes, he's like, I can make something useful out of this and sell it.
Yeah.
So, and the water is clean now too. I guess that's nice.
Yes.
And
that became.
I guess that was just one of the things he did.
Right.
I mean, he worked for a company his whole life.
Yes.
In directing chemistry. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the point, you have a fine art degree, I believe, or at least you went to school for fine art, or you graduated with it?
Yeah, I actually graduated, but I was meant to get a BFA, Bachelor of Fuck All.
Fine Arts. Fine Arts, I think, is what the university would have called it.
But by the time I got to my fourth year, I kind of realized that this is not useful.
Yes, but before your fourth year, you were already working in the sculpture lab, where you were helping with people making sculptures with metal fabrication and stone and many other ways that you would work with this.
Yeah.
Mike, the point that I'm trying to make here is that you actually have a substantial history that equates to effectively a design degree that you don't know that you have.
Yeah, well, a design degree is only as good as the diploma that hangs on your wall, which I don't have.
There's people with diplomas who aren't very good designers.
At it. Yes, I know.
People who don't have them who are great designers.
Definitely. But somehow the guy with the diploma gets paid more.
Sometimes.
That's an aside.
Sometimes.
Anyway, but that's just, it all boils down to being a maker of things. And the more time you spend making things, the more informed you are as you go along.
Yeah, but I'm not letting you get past the point that design is a process of thinking that you actually do absolutely, from my perspective, you apply design thinking towards your objects because you were very rational and you were well considered and you were conceptual and you were very good at abstracting and then making that abstraction a reality.
I consider
that is a process of design that most people actually don't have.
I would, that again, I guess we're talking about the same thing, but or in nomenclature, because for me that's not design, that's just thinking ahead of what I'm going to do. And in fact, dirty little secret is that I don't plan nearly as much as you think I do.
Sure.
A lot of those guitars, they come out because I see a piece of wood and I'm like, oh wait, I see where the guitar is in there.
Yeah.
And I clamp it into the bench and start carving away at it. And sometimes you change notions midway through, or sometimes I'll carve most of a body and they'll be like, actually this is a bass, you know?
Yeah.
or else, you know, I'll set it on fire and then it cracks and you're
That's
like, oh, but those cracks, and then I'll use that. That's planning ahead and being prepared to improvise. And whereas design, I feel, as a term, or being a designer as a term, means that what you are doing almost exclusively is separate from the action of creating.
Okay.
And mine is not separate at all.
So there is a professor at MIT, I think her name is Nari Oxma. We'll fact check that. She does wonderful work in all sorts of organic explorations, you know, where she's working with silkworms to sort of guide them to create things and such, sort of biomimicry and such. And I watched an abstract, it's called Abstract, a series on Netflix, where she was one of the featured artists or designers in it. And she said that there's a phrase, an Israeli phrase, whatever the culture of Israeli, because I don't think it's necessarily Jewish, but there's an Israeli phrase that roughly translates to, I give myself permission to change my mind at any point.
Yeah.
And she's a world-renowned designer.
Yeah.
And so just because you change your mind doesn't mean that you're not. So let me double enforce this. There's a chair, the stool, that was designed by a Polish company. I'm blanking on the name. I do remember the name of the stool, that was called the Plop stool.
Right, yeah.
And this stool is thin sheet metal. It's welded on the edges, and they basically it's a controlled explosion, and they called it controlled loss of control.
Yeah.
And it is designed, but you were intentionally creating a scenario where something randomish.
You give opportunity for chance to embellish the object.
Yes. And so I think that your process is a design process which encourages and even incentivizes a certain amount of randomness. It's a controlled loss of control. Let's see where this goes. I give myself permission I started making a guitar / now bass guitar / now burnt and cracked. Maybe I'll stick some gold in there. I don't know. Like, we'll see where this goes.
Yeah.
And I think that is actually intentional, even though you can't predict the exact end result. You know you're going down that road, and that you're going to allow a certain amount of creativity and randomness to happen.
Yeah, but this is where I say, where is the line between being a maker and a designer? And I would say I land on the maker side of that line, and the designer would definitely be trying to exert more planning and more adhering to a plan and less hands-on, you know. Yeah, because I'm just one guy.
Just one guy making stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think you have a grand propensity for oversimplification, but that was a guilty smile.
Cheers to oversimplification.
Oversimplification. So, now, there is all sorts of interesting history behind your work for me, which I really appreciate. I don't know anyone else who wanders out, and actually, I don't know what this is convenient for me, but there's a whole lot of horsetail? What?
Horsetails.
Horsetails.
Yeah.
Right behind you.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what they were until you told me what they were, and you made a little video about, this is sort of an ancient kind of sandpaper, and that comes from what I recall, your father had this to figure out all of the local fauna, and he regrew it in your backyard.
Kind of, yeah. We referred to it as the meadow, and it was sort of a corner of the backyard where,
Yes.
every time he found an interesting plant, he'd grab some seeds, or if there was enough of them, he'd take a little root and see if it would grow. And just sort of a matter of trying to discover how much biodiversity you can fit into just a plain old suburban backyard.
Yeah.
And there was a whole heck ton of it. And so that was part of another aspect of growing up and being not just someone who made lots of things and also made music, but being out in nature. You learn about how connected we are with biology, and just like being comfortable understanding what a tree is and is not. And a tree is not a plank of wood that is inert and dry.
Right.
A tree is a tall and flexible living being that it's trying to live its own life just as you are. And there's fierce competition for light and not falling over in the wind. And 100 million years of plant evolution leads to a whole lot of actually completely unrelated plants being called trees because they are tall and have arrived at the similar conclusion, I guess call it convergent evolution, that being tall and competing for the light means you're going to grow tall. Growing tall means you're going to get pushed by the breeze, so you have to evolve the perfect combination of strength and flexibility for the given environment. And this is why we use wood for so much of everything, is because it's such an incredibly great material, because it had to be.
Yeah.
If it wasn't, something else would have outcompeted it. And we would have been using that something else, because that something else would have had the ideal combination of strength and stability.
Yeah.
So just lie down in the forest one day on a breezy afternoon, put your head next to a tree trunk and look up. And that super strong oak wood that you can't bend, it'll bend.
They're not inanimate objects.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Being part of nature gives you sort of the notion that, of an awareness of the possibilities of what's out there. And so, for instance, with the horsetails, I actually only fairly recently discovered that they used to use them to burnish instruments. So it was like a sort of primitive sandpaper
Buffing
polish.
pads.
Sort of and in fact, the Dutch name for that stuff translates as like scouring reeds or scouring rushes, because they would use it for, cleaning the silverware. And so I was like, oh, well, now that I know that, I know where the horsetails grow, because I go for walks in the forest.
And right here, you're welcome to as much horsetail as you'd like.
Oh, I don't need any more. There's plenty. It grows very happily in a lot of places. Part of the reason it was used was because it was common, and you need to scrub the pots and pans. Oh, just go grab some horsetails from down the road. It's not something you have to import or grow specially. It's just there.
But at the risk of people believing that you know one random fact, this is not the case. So, you've been here before. We sit on the porch. You say, oh, and you start naming what I think are the weeds in my backyard.
Oh. Well, you're asking about what kind of flower is this? And I was like, I think that's that. Yeah, I don't remember that many flowers.
But I live here.
But you didn't look them up.
I know.
Where's that curiosity you value so much?
Yeah, but it wasn't. It's also your experience growing up, and frankly, my parents weren't as curious with it. Actually, my mother sort of forlongs that she remembers as a child. Her father was out in the bush all the time, and she remembers that her dad would teach her the names of all the trees, and she looks back fondly, but also with a bit of regret that she didn't actually learn the identify old ways. All the trees anymore. She used to be able to be much better at it. And so there's this connection to the land. And I told you my father's family is from Newfoundland, and it's not a very academic sort of place. Newfoundland is a very simple. A lot of my family talks something like what you imagine a sailor might talk like, or a pirate, and
I know the Newfie accent.
But my aunties will, as we're walking somewhere, go, oh, we use that when we have a upset stomach. Or if you walk through the thistles and you're stinging in pain, because that happens with those thistles, you can take that one, you can rub it on it, and it will make the stinging go away. And they have this practical knowledge of their land that I'm completely disconnected from, but you're not.
Well, I don't. I only know a little bit compared to, your father's family who lived out in the bush, and the reality is that people are as smart and as capable absolutely anywhere on this earth, no matter where you are. And they could have been a great physicist or engineer, but they lived in an outport, and you really needed to be good at fixing your boat and good at felling your trees. And if you were good at that, you could also have been good at accounting or lawyering or quantum mechanics or whatever it is. Everywhere there is, and we should value every kind of knowledge if it is truly knowledge. And I know I don't have nearly as much of that as I should.
So
but
let me
I have enough to get by, and I'm always learning more.
Yeah, that's again incredibly unaware or overly modest, Mike, because you know a lot more than the average suburban kid does.
Yeah, but that's unfortunate. That's tragic to me.
Well, yes, but you have to know that it's true. So I agree with what you're saying. The last time I was in Newfoundland, I was out fishing in the bay, right? And with one of my uncles, and another uncle is out there fishing, getting some codfish, and then we hear a noise, and he's taking his boat up to the shore, and we hear someone's got a chainsaw, and they're cutting down some trees. My uncle, who's like 70 years old, takes a half a dozen trees, throws them in his boat, goes back, cuts them up, and is refurbishing the wharf.
Oh.
Back there.
Yeah.
And my other cousin, because we have a big family there, so my dad's one of 14 kids. I have like 150 or 200 cousins from my grandmother down, like it's a huge family. And we catch our legal limit, because there's a limit on how many codfish you can capture.
Yeah.
And so we caught our legal limit, and we caught one more, because there's 3 or 4 of us fishing. Two of us got to fish at the same time.
Yeah.
Hey, Larry, you want to fish by?
Yeah.
Sure. My uncle takes the codfish, and like we would a rock, skims it across the water.
Yeah. Skips the content.
75 meters across the water into the other guy's boat.
So you get good at anything if it matters and if you practice.
Yes, but all of my father's generation don't have anything more than a grade 8 education at max. They all went to work full time by the time they were 12 to 14 years old. Boys, girls, didn't matter.
And they learned as much as they could take. It just wasn't, a calculus.
Right. And I'm going to ask you to share a little bit of a story here, because I'm going to expose you, and I'm going to close my case on this.
No. Bring it on.
Because I remember a story of you and Ian Weston, and some of our viewers might know Ian. Ian's one of the great repair guys, but also Plek guys that Plek flies around the world to set up the machines at Collings and Martin or wherever. And you and Ian were out with some other friends, and one friend thought, I'm going to bring this maybe cedar strip canoe or birch bark canoe.
He had a really old cedar strip canoe covered in fiberglass. And we were doing it was a punishing portage between one lake and the next lake, and it was quite a steep hill, and he's carrying a big heavy backpack and this canoe that's a little bit waterlogged. At the top of the hill, he couldn't make it. He had to throw the canoe off his back. He was just and he just lay down for a little while. And when he tossed the canoe to one side, it hit a trunk and punched a little hole in it, just a little hole. And
it doesn't need to be a big hole.
Water. Exactly. But so when we eventually recovered and we got the rest of the way down to the next lake, and we're like, that's definitely got a bit of a hole in it. We got to do something about that, or even a short paddle. We're going to take on too much water. It's going to waterlog the wood. And so
but there's no hardware store nearby.
No,
we're in the middle of nowhere.
We're 2 days travel out into the woods.
Yes.
But I forget who came up with the idea, but we were like, there's like pine trees, and we could take pine sap and so we collected some pine sap, and with a knife and a lighter, and managed to melt and smear some pine sap onto this little cracked hole, and patched it up pretty nicely. Didn't take too long, kept on going with our canoe trip all the way down the Barron Canyon.
Right. Do you know how many?
That pine sap is still on that canoe. He hasn't
repair
fixed it.
Job. Because that works.
It works.
I love it. Do you know how many first year university students from the city went out for a canoe trip and had that happen, and they were fucked. Like they
Call in the helicopters.
calling in the helicopter to get them out of there, but not you.
Well,
Not
no, they had duct tape, and that was our first thought. Is, oh well, I'm glad one of us brought a roll of duct tape, didn't
Yes.
we? Nope.
Nope.
Okay. What do we do next?
Yeah, and you understood enough about your environments to be able to, because this is the thing I started to say a long time ago in our conversation, is that when I was at odds with the schools, I said, listen, I don't care what you teach them. I don't need you to teach them what to think. I need you to teach them how to think.
Yeah.
Because what you understood in that scenario is, I need something to plug this hole. What could that be? I need something that's adhesive, something that will have some resilience against the water, so on and so forth. You looked around yourself and you were able to apply that understanding and find a solution because you knew how to think, not what to think.
Actually, no. It was from empirical knowledge ahead of time because you know what they used to use to make old wooden boats. Again, I'm a maker of things.
No,
And
I don't know, and that's the point, because you do.
well, I have just read, a little bits and pieces of how old wooden boats used to be built.
As one does.
As one does. and that's how that's what pitch is that they would use to seal the boats. Pitch is just boiled pine rosin.
I didn't know that. I've heard the word pitch, but I did not know that it was boiled pine rosin.
Yep.
Because most people do not research how to make old boats. And they read the word pitch and don't wonder, oh, what's pitch? And how do you make it? But you do.
Yeah, well,
And I love that.
or you figure it out.
I really do appreciate that about you. And the reason I wanted to talk about this, because Mike, I think it is one of the things that differentiates you. It's not that there's no one else who knows this, not that no one else could do that, but I certainly think that when most people think about guitar makers, which is of course our reason for knowing each other, they don't think that this person should know something about making a boat and pitch and being out in a canoe and getting yourself out of a bad scenario. And you and I have been in some bad scenarios. You and I have been stuck in the mud and
You figured out. That was my thought process in Calais. It was like, well, mud is a lot like snow. We've all been stuck in a snowbank before.
Right.
What do you do to get out of a snowbank? You need a little grip, but you need to dig a little bit of a ramp.
the answer is not more snow.
No.
The answer is not.
But I was about to say something, but you threw me off track. But the basic lesson is learn everything, because everything is relevant potentially. Everything can be relevant if you want it to be, or if you're thrown in a position where it needs to be.
Right.
Know everything. Be curious about everything. Even if you're not curious about it, learn about it.
Be curious. Yes.
Or even if you're not curious, learn anyway. If you're one of those people who's capable of reading something that they're not actually interested in, I can't do that, but plenty of people can,
Yeah.
They're the ones who can become lawyers and accountants, because if you've ever read that sort of stuff, you got to be able to read even without being interested in it.
Yeah.
Just learn.
And that is
Learn
relevant
everything.
from day one to day ending.
Yeah.
Be
From the
curious.
moment you're born,
Yeah.
learn. Keep
So
learning. Keep learning.
As you know, I'm a grandfather now. My
Yeah.
grandson Theo is now 10 months old.
Yeah.
And we were just with him with our in Strasbourg with our family. And he is at the age now where he wants to explore. He has some agency. He can move around. He can touch things.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't want to just sit in a chair anymore.
Yep.
And we're at a dinner, at a restaurant. We're all going to eat, waiting for something, and the baby starts to fuss. And so I say, Theo, let's go exploring.
Yeah.
And I pick him up, and we're in an old city. I can't just put him down on the ground, but what I can do is I can walk up to an old stone wall. I say,
Just
and
let
I
him
touch
touch
it.
it.
I say, feel this, and he's like, oh.
Yeah.
And he touches it, and he's like, oh, he just wants to get. And we found
So
this
that's
little
the role of a
little
parent or a grandparent,
blue
is just
tag on the building.
give
that's-
ourselves opportunities to learn. That is all.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you're 10 months old, you learn by touching and putting it in your mouth.
And there's no fussing anymore.
Yeah.
Because he's stimulated. He's like, oh, I want it. He doesn't need an iPad.
We
He
all
certainly doesn't
naturally,
need your phone.
we are desperately hungry for
Yes.
experience. And
Yes.
it's only I think conditioning and time, eventually we just get tired of not getting that experience, and then we give up.
Yeah.
And that's how you become an office worker.
Oh.
I said I don't mind being intellectually confrontational, but yeah, we should
I am
always.
an office worker also.
Nah.
I'm curious, and I mean, you were in my office last night, and you're like, "Whoa, it's like mission control here."
Yeah.
You're like, "What is happening?" You know?
Yeah, but you got a window on a lake.
It's true. To the left of my desk, to mission control,
Yeah.
is this, and which can be a problem sometimes. Sometimes I'm trying to work and I look out and there's an otter on the edge of the ice as the seasons are changing, and you cannot work when there's an otter playing right here. There's no way. You have to watch the otter.
Learn everything.
Learn everything.
Be open to experience.
Yeah, the otters were just cute. Otters are dangerous motherfuckers.
Yeah.
They're serious killers.
Oh yeah.
Like weasels are killers, and otters kill weasels.
They're big weasels that can swim too.
Yeah.
You're not safe anywhere. Once they learn to fly, it's over.
Yeah. And excellent hunters.
Yeah.
Because I watched one as the ice was clearing off here, and he'd go down, and like, I'm not kidding you, like 5-10 seconds, come up with a fish. Like really fast.
Yeah.
Eat the fish, go down, 10 seconds later, he's got another fish. Like up on the edge of the ice, I'm like, this is an excellent hunter.
Yeah.
No wonder they can be so playful.
Yeah.
They have time.
They have time.
They have time because they're just so good at the hunting.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com.
So, I want to talk about some of your really unusual experiments recently. Because we were in Osaka.
You'll have to be more specific.
I'm going to be. So we were in Osaka together.
Yeah.
You had 3 pieces there with us.
Yes. Did I? 3 guitars?
Yes, you did. You had a harp guitar. You had...
right. Yeah, okay. It wasn't that long ago, but I made a lot of guitars.
They're
starting to all blend
but
together.
The point is, you had 3 different price tags, let's say, for instruments there. But one of those pieces we made as the feature, as somewhat of an art and design installation.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The paper tiger.
The paper tiger has electric teeth.
Has electric teeth, yes. And people stopped over and over again because you had culturally perhaps relevant. You used a sort of a washi paper.
Yeah, I used a Japanese hand-printed paper on the back of that instrument.
Back, which I chose to turn around as the first thing that sees the back of the guitar, which is not the normal choice.
Yeah, but it was good.
But
it really worked.
It really grabbed them.
I also did pay attention. Again, being sculpture experienced, it's got to be interesting from all angles. And so, the back is an interesting angle, but it was also kind of at 45 degrees. So, it was perfect because it invited people to sort of walk around it and into the space, and now you've got them.
They're in the room. They don't realize it. They're on the carpet now.
You have entered the room, whether you wanted to or not.
Yeah, I'm very aware of it. That's part of my job as a curator is to
it worked out great.
Create that environment. But it's your pieces, of course, and the other guitar makers' pieces that allow me to do what I do. And so you use this very, very thin electric, in quotes for those who are just listening, electric guitar, because it is. But you created these speaker boxes, which are not traditional speaker boxes, but they're made almost a little more like what an acoustic guitar body would be.
They're like resonating boxes, but they're resonators that are activated electrically by the guitar.
Yes. So as opposed to just going to a paper cone and a tube amplifier the way that we have done it, you said let's put this back around and put it back to an acoustic-like soundboard.
I've separated the acoustic guitar from the interface device.
Yes.
As in the part that you use strumming, doesn't have to be also the part with the big box.
Yeah.
I mean, that's simple because they're mechanically connected, so that's how the sound comes out. But you can connect them electronically as well.
Yes.
And that's, you know, so that's it.
Yeah, and it's this curiosity and exploration, again, that I think really defines your work. So for curious people, they feel stimulated and energized to interact with such a piece.
Yeah.
For the traditional golden years sort of person who's there to reenact a moment, they might say, well, Jimi Hendrix or Bob Dylan didn't play that. I can't reenact
I got some
Bob Dylan
much
on that.
nastier comments than that.
Well,
Well, not in Japan, but on the internet
Oh,
afterwards.
I'm sure. That's very normal.
You know what? You know you're doing something right when you get a bit of
When the
that.
haters show up.
And honestly, I'm glad that at least they got shown a picture of something they didn't like, because if only people who like it are seeing it, then your algorithm is not serving you very well. So yeah. So I'm actually happy to get a little bit of negative commentary. It just shows me I'm doing something right.
Yeah. Do you remember any of it? Can you share some responses?
No,
No? Okay.
I don't want to dignify it with a response.
No, oh come on! I don't believe in the no platforming thing. I think that you should allow the crazies to talk so that everyone else can see they're crazy, as opposed to trying to silence them.
Yeah,
You
well, I
know?
also just don't remember literally
remember.
because I don't
That's a
care
different
that
answer.
much.
That's a different answer than not wanting to dignify them.
I was like, oh, okay, good. I'm getting a little controversy generated is nice, but that's all I read was, oh, good, some controversy, and I didn't see anything useful. Or if I don't see anything useful or relevant, I guess I don't really remember the specifics. If there was useful or relevant commentary, I would be like, oh, okay, let's work with this. Let's debate this. But nah. More like if it's just, oh, that's the ugliest thing I ever saw. I'm like,
Really?
you got to get out more.
So there are people who are known as innovators, and they are innovators. People like Les Paul. Les Paul did innovate a number of things.
Yeah.
He was very exploratory.
Yeah.
However, he had interactions with Leo Fender and the Telecaster when Gibson still wasn't willing to make a solid body electric guitar.
Okay.
And from what I know, and someone's I'm sure going to tell me I'm wrong on this, but from the stories that I've heard, it just didn't look right. And he wasn't willing to play that because it didn't look like a respectable musical instrument. And the Les Paul was more or less a rendering of a archtop guitar.
Yeah.
It's a small, solid. Honestly, if they could make it as big, they probably would have, but it was just too
It was gonna be too
and
heavy.
too gangly at that size.
Yeah.
So they had to reduce the size to make it somewhat bearable.
Yeah.
And even then, it's still horrible in balance. But the point is, it looked more the part
Yeah.
when the Telecaster did not, even though it's now considered to be a traditional
Very old-fashioned,
instrument. But at the time, it didn't have any of the history of the Cremonese sort of archtop violin tops, varnish finishes, all of the typical luthier choices of wood and such. And so someone who was even considered to be a trailblazer, an innovator, actually was not. There was still a point. I'm only willing to go so far
Yeah.
with that. And so, whenever we are putting forth a proposition, an idea, a thought, a product, a crafted object, an art piece, it is still ultimately validated by some receiver, by some perceiver. There is no sound without an eardrum. It's just energy in motion and the auditory perceptors. Okay, you can replace the eardrum with another type of receiver, but the auditory perceptors is what translates that into sound versus sight, versus smell or taste. It's the same process until you get to the perception part of it. And whether it's a
Well, no,
guitar
because
or
you
not.
can't see sound pressure waves. That's a type of information that can only be done in a certain way.
No, it's the exact same thing. It's energy in motion. When it's perceived by your eye, it's light. And the frequency, we perceive it, we call it sight. It's the frequency of the motion that interacts with the eardrum that we call sound. It's the frequency of that we even call cold or heat. It's the frequency of energy in motion. Let's not dive too deep down that rabbit trail right now. The point is, the perceiving part is fundamental, even when it gets down to the most basic of physics and the human experience. And it's fundamental when it comes time to getting someone to accept what you do or not. Someone who is disagreeable enough to play an unusual instrument, but not an unusual instrument that looks like that. It was the point I was trying to make with Les Paul, who is considered to be a trailblazer and an innovator, but yet couldn't see himself playing a Telecaster.
Yeah.
And so, whereas other perceivers / receivers, because you want them to receive your instrument and exchange some value for it.
Yeah.
There are others like myself who say, I don't want to play that because everyone else plays that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be like everyone else.
Yeah.
And so that last part of the chain, the reception of it and the perception of it, that decides whether or not we will receive it, is an important part of it. And so when you put forth an unusual proposition like the paper tiger has electric teeth, there's going to be a whole segment of the marketplace who's looking to reenact the fact that they only play guitar because they loved Bob Dylan or Jimi Hendrix or whoever it happened to be. You can say a more modern name, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Interchange them with person X.
Yeah.
And you can't relive that moment with something that you have no idea of what it is.
Yeah. Well, I think that's in a specific, guitar world viewpoint is what the way you're thinking. But I'm thinking more in terms of, like, if you're a sculptor, there's not that burden of having to conform to certain expectations or history.
There is if you want to be bought by a museum or an art gallery.
Well, maybe, but the whole point of a modern art gallery is that it's supposed to show things that are different and new. And what are we learning from you that we haven't seen before? Like the experiments with the using silkworms to create sculptures. That's a new concept that somebody is exploring and making. And well, it's not a Henry Moore, it's not a Michelangelo. It's something new, and that's what makes it more interesting. They're not going to be buying, people who are copying Michelangelo. They're not going to be buying those sculptures. And so, in the guitar world, my guitars might look pretty out there, but I consider them they are the compromise with the marketplace, because if it wasn't that, I'd maybe be just doing sculptures that have no, purpose other than to be themselves.
Would you? Would you be a sculptress and your compromise is to make guitars?
Yeah, I think so, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe, I'm not going to be able to come up with a yes, just like that, but, maybe.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I don't know where else to go from there.
Well, those things get redefined. So I'm writing an article right now on people who redefine our perception. And so I think we've probably discussed this before. One of the great examples for me is the Armory Show in New York about 100 years ago, roughly 1917 was it, or something of the sort?
Something like that,
somewhere on there. Where Marcel Duchamp came back from Europe with a bunch of modern art pieces, when modern art was modern and new, when nobody knew what the hell it was. And art was tax-free, it was tax-exempt.
Yeah.
But the U.S. Customs saw some very minimalist sculptures from Constantine Brancusi, and they said, this is not sculpture. You don't get this to be tax-free. And they levied something like a 40%
import tax.
And imported it as kitchen utensils and medical supplies.
Yeah.
Like, that's not just a tax, that's a fuck you tax.
Yeah.
Right? That's like kitchen utensils and medical supplies.
Yeah.
It definitely was not kitchen utensils and medical supplies.
Yeah.
But they were making a point that this is not art. And the thing is, according to American law, it was not art. Because sculpture, as defined in the US taxation sort of law, was a physical representation of still life. So it could be, if it looked like a horse.
Yeah.
Or
so
a
the legal concept was that, but they did eventually change it.
They fought it.
Yeah.
Peggy Guggenheim got involved.
Yeah.
Duchamp fought it. Brancusi was in Paris. But they fought it, and they eventually got the law changed and redefined. They expanded the legal definition of sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
And there are moments, in 1977, when Ned Steinberger releases the Steinberger bass, this headless instrument, that I'm sure lots of people laughed at. I've spoken with Ned about this. He says, no one's more surprised than me that there are so many people making headless guitars out there in the world right now. He's shocked about it, but he's happy about it. But he's very surprised because there was a period where they went out of fashion and no one was making headless guitars. But now you are one of them who are making headless guitars sometimes, not all of your guitars.
Yeah.
And there are those moments where we redefine what is art, what is a guitar. And now there's a much larger segment of the market who's willing to accept the concept of a guitar without a peghead than there was before. And that is what you're coming up against when someone makes a nasty comment about that's really ugly, because they literally do not know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So they'll say something like, they'll say, who's going to play that?
Mm-hmm.
Which we can take as an affront, but actually they're making an admission. The admission is, I have no context in my brain to imagine who might play that instrument, but the moment someone does, and now you see Sting playing a Steinberger bass live in concert, and you go to see Peter Gabriel and his guitar player, Adrian Belew or Reese Gabriel, whoever it was, playing a Steinberger guitar, and you start to see them everywhere else. Well, now they don't say who's going to play that. They're like, oh,
I have an answer.
That's a Sting bass.
Yeah.
Or that's a whatever, right? And then there's a body of work built around it, and we associate a sound with it, we associate a music with it, and that's why we call art shop guitars jazz guitars.
Jazz guitars, bullshit. Yeah.
Sure, everyone who makes a modern art shop hates that.
Yeah.
But
and I think the perception is changing.
There's a canon built around it, there's a songbook. When you judge the guitar, they play certain styles and certain songs to see, does it do that?
Yeah.
It's like it's like going to church and singing Iron Maiden, or singing a Marilyn Manson song, or singing whatever. It's out of context and it feels a bit weird. And they say, well, that's not a good thing to do here. And they judge guitars by the songbook that's written, so that people who are not going to imagine something new can say, oh, I will now take this object and I will associate it with this songbook, and now I get what I'm supposed to do with it.
Yeah. But a responsive and good player will pick up the modern arch top, maybe play a few old school jazz chords, and realize that that isn't it. They'll quickly start pushing the boundary, find out what the guitar is good for, and discover that it can play anything they want.
Or they're a jazz player and tell you, you don't know how to make an arch top.
One or the other. Either way, right? We've learned something.
Yeah. And so, anyways, I love the fact that you can say, one way or the other, we've learned something. And it's that openness. And I hope you'll always continue to be that way, Mike.
I think at this point,
life.
it's too late to change now.
Is it?
Well, always stay curious. Maybe I'll learn what it's like to be a stick in the mud.
Well, hey, listen. Thank you for being on Life with Strings Attached.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate you being here. I think I somehow have a better life for knowing you and for having a chance to work with you. And I appreciate that you give us the opportunity to share your work. And so it's not easy to let someone else take your stuff and carry your narrative and your story sometimes. And so I appreciate that. If I were a better interviewer, I might have asked some other question. Is there something that I should have said or asked you that you wanted to talk about today that I didn't?
No, but we're gonna do this again sometime, and we'll there's a lot of more ground that we'll cover about other subjects. Yeah, about the definition of art and how it changed from representations of things to now the current definition being, is it an object with a specified use or not? That's sort of the current definition of art according to customs.
Yes.
There's some gold to be mined in them there hills. Till next time.
Let's do that. Till next time. Dura,
maybe
it's time to go inside and get one more.
Maybe a glass of water.
Thanks, Mike.
All right.
Well, Mike, this wasn't recording. You mind if we start over?
All right, fix another drink.
Thank you for watching and listening. You can find more episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts, and a special thanks to those who support us on Patreon. It's your support that enables us to do this work.